Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are very Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better in New York or New Jersey. Go to EdenMemorial.com.
Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
It's a true pleasure to be with you this evening. Amazing pleasure. And these days, it's really a pleasure anywhere in New York without a subpoena for my appearance.
Well, we have 3 people in the studio that were there last night.
Without a subpoena.
And all 3 of us never got subpoenas. And all 3 of us were on the dais. You got Ed Cox, and you have Governor Patterson, and myself. And we'll talk about tonight. And we have Judge Richard Weinberg. Maybe we'll invite him next year. And and we got Rita Cosby.
And I've been to many of them, and I was watching last night, by the way, you guys. That was such a great moment, John, with the president, with former President Trump. And I thought he had some other funny ones. He also, when he commiserated with Eric Adams and said, hey, I've complained about the migrant crisis. You're complaining. You got, indicted, And what did you think, Governor Patterson?
It was terrific. And Mayor Adams was grinning ear to ear. And I haven't seen him do that in about 6 months.
And you talked to the president, too. There was some video of you talking to the president.
Well, the president and I had mutual contempt for a certain individual. I won't mention the person's name. They're no longer with us.
Is the person sitting in the room?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
And we were carrying on about it. And I think people watching us weren't sure that we were having a pleasant or unpleasant conversation. When the president realized it, he put his arm around me and he said, no, we're talking about an old friend that we miss. And
he was very cordial, right?
Totally.
Totally. John, I thought he was superb.
I think
he can do that when he wants to.
I think he would win 49 states if he was as cordial in the future as if he was last night. What do you say,
But John is very formal with Chuck Schumer. He said he could run for president, didn't he?
Yeah, as the first female president, if it doesn't work out this time.
Very cordial.
But you know what was funny? It was also like a nice rapport. I saw him also talking to Governor Kathy Hochul. I mean, I agree with John. That what last night, and I was curious with you guys in the room. I mean, I'd say 70-80% in the room were clapping. And I thought even at the end,
I would put the number. I'm going to give you a number.
All right, let's hear.
In the room, you had maybe 700, 800. I don't remember how many people. And I would say, on the boos versus the claps, I think it was 70-30, Trump. Governor, and then we'll go to Ed Cox.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that.
Ed?
70% for Trump.
Yes.
30, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And how was the response to the vice president's tape?
Oh, my God.
Almost like they played like mood music for a few minutes and then it went away.
Yeah,
that bad? I hate mood music. It
really annoyed the Catholics. And I had a speech this morning. I was talking to the board of directors. They call it the Archdiocesan Council of the Greek Orthodox Church. And I made a comment about it. And I said, it seems like Kamala, and I don't know, I only had lunch with her at one time. And maybe the governor would say something, was the parts of the Democratic Party are anti-Christo-Judeo rules and the
values,
way of life.
Right, values. Yeah.
Well, Governor, what do you say?
I'll say this. I know one Catholic that was very upset by the process, and I won't say who it is, but his initials are Cardinal Dolan.
Yeah, he said he was disappointed.
He was.
You know what I found interesting, and John and Gov and Ed who were there, I was watching it, and first of all, it was the woman from SNL who was playing the Catholic schoolgirl. I found it offensive that they were sort of mocking Catholics, and I didn't find it funny, and barely Kamala said a word in it.
The Al Smith dinner has a certain style to it, and you just can't do it by video, and they really didn't do it well at all.
And the big item that all religious people should ask, she turned it down 2 months ago. It isn't if she had an emergency.
Right, exactly. Because if she had turned it down because of an emergency, everybody would have understood. But there's this problem in campaigns, and I'm sorry to say this for myself, that too many Democratic campaigns of overthinking, like we're going to let Trump destroy himself. We're not going to go. And they got back the opposite of what they wanted. And by the way, if they woke up this morning and didn't realize it was a bad mistake, then it's going to lead to more of them.
Well, you only got 15, 16 days. I mean, Ed Cox and everybody in the studio here, the other big problem around is the Lebanon, Israel, Iran. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people today, done some conversations for my Sunday show. We're on the verge of World War III. We got so many wars going on, and Israel is trying to decide what they're going to do with Lebanon. You guys have anything to say?
With Iran. I mean, Iran had a major attack on Israel, and Israel has been putting it off. Question is, what's the deal with the United States? Has the United States saying you can't do this, you can't do that?
Oh, they have.
They
absolutely have.
Leave the oil fields alone.
Right. And you know what's disgraceful
leave
today?
Facilities alone.
And I can't wait to talk with General Blaine Holt, who we're going to have later on in the show.
Later on. But the important thing is, Israel is keeping the free world free.
Absolutely.
Now, let me ask the other question. If they did what they thought was right to keep the free world free, would President Biden at this point back them up?
The answer is no. And I'll tell, but
your opinion.
Yeah, my opinion. My opinion.
A country
opinion.
Country of 8 million people is keeping the free world free.
Yes.
Incredible.
But I want to say one thing.
Great skill.
I want to hear from the
but hang on. We heard from Biden today a little bit ago. He's pumping his chest. Oh, like we got Sinwar. That's give me a break.
Yeah, they're the ones who told us to stay out of Rafah.
Yes, exactly. Governor Patterson.
Harris looked at the map. She says you can't go in there. I looked at the map.
Yeah.
Who knew she could read a map?
And that's where Sinwar was.
Governor, any opinion?
Just that if Israel goes ahead and does what they think is right, it will be very hard for Biden or whoever is president to go against them because of what all of you just said, that they're really attacking the problem rather than waiting for it to envelop us. Why beat Hamas and Hezbollah and then back off and let them regenerate? Why do that?
I agree 100%. And before we go on to our first guest, I want to say one more thing, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Mark Cuban, who was 110% for Biden, 120% for Harris, all of a sudden has done an apology. He apologized for the border crisis and the amount of people getting killed by importing those killers.
Yeah, and in fact, John, here's what he said. He was on CNBC, or CNN rather, and he said the border crisis got away from the Biden-Harris administration. And get this, you'll love this, Ed, because their hearts were too big. Oh. Is there anybody who buys that?
Wait. How did President Trump used to say, that's a lot of crap?
I mean, that's a new one, John. What do you make of that reasoning?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
come on. And also Elon Musk. And by the way, Elon Musk said something really interesting too, John. We were just talking about it before the show. Elon Musk bringing awareness, and we're going to have Rich Lowry on later on in the show about the border. But Elon Musk saying that the Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, those really nice guys who are taking over some of the apartment complexes in Aurora, he said, have now taken over at least 4 apartment complexes in San Antonio, Texas. And remember, he's got his business there in San Antonio. So it looks like it's spreading, which is not a good thing.
Gangs are cancer for America. Why won't they wake up and face it?
And we allowed them to come in.
Not us. Not us. The Biden
President Biden allowed them to come in.
Right.
All right, full stop. Let's go to our first guest.
And joining us now is Judge Andrew Napolitano, of course.
Has Judge Napolitano got religion yet?
I think you have, Judge, right?
I love you, Judge. You know that.
Do I have religion? I'm an old-fashioned Latin Mass attending pre-Vatican II Roman Catholic. That's my religion.
Okay.
By the way,
Real deal.
By the way, what did you make of the Al Smith dinner? I thought it was I thought Trump did great, and I think shameful that Kamala didn't show up.
I think she made a major mistake by not showing up. But, it's not the bad news is not going to last forever. But she lost this news cycle. I thought Trump was terrific. I wasn't there, but I did watch.
I was looking for you.
Oh, well, did you have an extra seat at your table?
Same time next year, I'll put you next to Judge Weinberg.
Oh, it'd be
Sounds
my pleasure.
like a date, Judge.
With Judge I would sit with Judge Weinberg on a picket fence, and it would be my pleasure to be there at that dinner.
I don't want to talk to you guys after you get off the fence, but anyway, go ahead.
I thought the president was terrific, and even though she did make a couple of funny one-liners, I thought she really made a mistake. Ask President Mondale what happens when you don't go to that dinner.
49 states. He lost.
Right.
Governor Patterson, you had another comment before when we talked. You said somebody else lost 49 states?
Oh, it was McGovern who lost 49 states when President Nixon didn't show up. And McGovern made this comment at the dinner that Nixon wasn't there, but he's sure that he was listening in, making fun of the bugging and the Watergate situation.
By the way, one of the funny lines last night was about Tim Walz that President Trump said. He said,
I want to hear this one.
Did you hear? He said Tim Walz wasn't here, but I'm sure he'll say he was.
Very funny.
Yeah.
Was Vance there, Rita?
No, he was not. No, he was not. Also, Judge, I want to get your take on this other. Speaking of which, because one of the things they talked about at Al Smith, and we played the line at the beginning, Judge, it was very funny where he said, hey, I'm here, not on a subpoena. I'm happy to appear basically here at Al Smith. Today, Judge Chutkan in D.C. said, I don't want to interfere with the election. That's why I'm putting out some of these documents from, January 6th tied to Jack Smith. A lot of it's grand jury testimony and other things. How is it not election interference to put it out right now? I mean, come on.
I haven't seen these materials. I've read a couple of articles in the past 2 hours from reporters who have, and there's no there because, as Judge Weinberg could tell you, much of this stuff is grand jury material, and he can't release it, and she's not supposed to release it, and it was all redacted. So of the hundreds and hundreds of pages, there are so many that are all covered in black because you're not allowed to see anything.
They're doing it for the headline, Judge.
Well, they are getting a headline, but once you go beneath the headline, it doesn't damage Trump at all because there's nothing new. There's nothing that came out today that we didn't already know in terms of the government's allegations, and it's just an allegation. I don't think this is election interference. I don't think it's going to move the dial at all. If it does move the dial, it moves it in Trump's direction by animating the base who perceive this as, again, using the judicial and law enforcement system to try and harm him.
The only negative thing that I saw was that Attorney General Barr said to Trump, you really don't have a fraud in this election. And somehow people who don't know better think that gives it more credibility. That's the lawyer's opinion, but it's up to the client to make his own decision.
I agree with you, Judge Weinberg. I don't think that a statement like that from Bill Barr makes Trump's intent criminal.
Exactly right.
Trump sought the opinion of many, many people, lawyers and lay people, as to whether or not there was fraud in 2020. Some said there was, but we can't prove it. Some, like Rudy said, there was and we can prove it. And some said there wasn't. He did the right thing. A cross-section of opinions. That doesn't hurt him. It helps him by showing that he was reasonable and sought a lot of people's opinions.
And real quick before we let you go, Judge, also, have you seen these lawsuits that are going in both directions about kicking people off who are not citizens on the voter rolls? I mean, it's a noble intent. People got to feel good about the process. And the Department of Justice is suing Virginia. And now Florida is going after the federal government because they're saying the Biden-Harris administration isn't allowing them to have access to know who's a citizen and who isn't. I mean, this is crazy.
Rita, John, and my friends, this is the tip of the iceberg. If you think we saw a lot of litigation in 2020, there were only 61 cases filed. There are over 200 already filed, and we have 3 weeks to go to Election Day.
Wow.
So this is a lawyer's dream or a lawyer's nightmare in terms of trying to sort all this out. Something tells me I'll be quite busy.
Better that they're sooner rather than after the election, though.
Yeah,
yes,
great pointed.
Unfortunately, yes.
Wow. Well, Judge Napolitano, thank you. We love having you on,
it's a
Judge.
pleasure to be back with you guys. I forgot to ask you, since it's Friday, is the pizza there?
You know what? No, now we're serving escargot and lobster.
We got 500 pizzas. We got 500 pizzas delivered to the Columbus Avenue Parade, and we ate pizza like there was no tomorrow.
There was only one left in the office. That means $4.99 on the parade.
Next time I'll help you polish it off. It's one of my weaknesses. But thank you very much for having me on. I love you guys, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We love you too. Thank you. We also will be getting Doug Schoen in just about a moment. We're trying to reach him. I believe a little bit of a connection issue there, but he's going to be coming in a moment. One of the things is about polls that we're going to be talking to him about, Ed. And of course, polls being the big issue. I'm curious to see how after Kamala Harris and the Fox News interview, I think she tanked. I thought she did horrible. And some of the new polls that I've seen, I just saw a poll from Michigan, and they're all moving to help Trump.
They did the interview with Bret Baier, because the polls are moving against Harris, and they are panicking.
They took her out of the basement. They thought that they had to change strategy.
Yeah.
They had to change the strategy because it wasn't working by hiding her, and everybody was going after her that she wasn't doing interviews, so they figured they would turn it around. And it turns out she's not capable of turning it around, as Bret Baier showed.
Real Clear averages, they are all just moved into the Trump column, all the swing states except for Nevada.
Yeah, and well, what do you think is happening with Nevada? Why is that?
Nevada's always been the premier state with respect to the Democrats.
They bet that she was going to win.
No.
Yeah. And Wisconsin will be
They
next.
don't want to lose their bet.
Right.
No.
Yeah. It's Nevada, you know.
No, because you have Reno and you have Vegas are both Democratic towns.
Did you hear the big news today in Las Vegas? Hold on, I'll give you the guy's name. At 73 years old, Archie Karras, a gambling legend, died at 73 years old. And that's a shame. It was in the Wall Street Journal today. And you know what I said to all my Greek friends? I said, aggravation and stress. That will get you every time.
Well, by the way, speaking of stress, I mean, you look at all these lawsuits. What did you make, you guys, of that comment from Judge Napolitano that it's going to be a lawyer's paradise before and after the election? I mean, do you think... I mean, we had John Fund on the show, too, that he thinks it's going to be election weeks. Maybe.
I had John Fund on my Sunday show.
Right.
Oh, good. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, he is...
Are you going to give us a little tease of what you're going to talk with him about?
I think what I'm going to talk to him about is if Trump behaves himself, he would be 10 points ahead. And I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is the GOP says they got thousands of people who are watching the polls. And you know what my opinion is? They should come up with a mandatory $10,000 fine for election fraud or somebody double
votes, right?
Double voting.
Yeah.
$10,000 fine or mandatory 2 years in jail.
Yeah, there should be. There needs to be sort of the fear of God. Right.
You have to. We want honesty. We want honesty in the United States.
Why do you think the Justice Department is suing the state of Virginia for cleaning up the record rolls?
Maybe that's why they can't allow Trump to get elected, because some of them may go to jail.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That is preposterous. Well, you guys, we're going to take a quick break. We have Larry Kudlow after the break to find out what's happening in the economy. And also we have Rich Lowry coming up on the border, General Blaine Holt, and a lot more. Another action-packed show.
Doug Schoen might show up eventually.
We'll see. We're working on it.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Cats and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Cats and Cosby. Lots of economic news, John.
A lot of economic news, and we have the countries number one expert in what the heck is going on with the economy. We have Larry Kudlow with us. Larry, did you have a good time last night, first of all?
Yes, I did, actually. I did. I'm not as keen on big crowds in my old age.
None of us are.
I know.
Cindy left before you.
I was very glad to be there, and I was at a great table, which was Margot's table, and I got to visit with you. I think both of us are getting better. And I thought Donald Trump won the night, A, just by being there. B, some of his jokes were pretty good. Some of them weren't so great. But I thought that, unfortunately, Kamala Harris's video was just an insult. Not just to Catholics. It was an insult to everybody. Just horrible. But that was a national event because all the TV stations were covering it. And she made an enormous mistake not showing up. The video was awful. And Trump did very well for himself. And I just want to say a couple things on the stock markets and so forth. You're still new record highs on the Dow and the S&P. That's one point. Gold is booming, 2,736 at the close. Silver, $34. Oil down because tensions in the Mideast, I think, are a bit less.
I'll give you a better one. If Trump gets elected, oil's going to be 55.
I thought 40. He says it's going down by 50%, so 40. But you're right. And there's a wonderful story in the New York Post this morning. You probably saw it. Stan Druckenmiller, who's a longtime friend of mine, a very, very smart investor. He is, and he's not a Trump guy, but he's saying the street is now the market is betting on Trump. And I'll quote you. He says, "You can see it in the bank stocks. You can see it in crypto," Druckenmiller told Bloomberg News. "In the last 12 days, the market and the inside of the market is very convinced Trump is going to win." He himself is not declaring for either candidate. That doesn't mean he's going to win, but it's very interesting. Bank stocks are such an important barometer of the current and future health, not just of the stock market, but of the entire economy, because credit and lending is so important. So markets are doing very well, and Druckenmiller thinks it's good for Trump.
So Larry Kudlow, Ed Cox here. If commodities are going up, gold in particular, but inflation's going down, that doesn't quite make sense. And long-term yields are going up. What's going on?
I agree with you, by the way. Gold, it can be a haven of safety, and it can be an inflation barometer. It can go both ways. But gold has had a tremendous run, and incidentally, so has silver had a tremendous run. So $34 for silver is a big number, but $27.36 for gold is, and it's unusual to see gold going up and oil going down. So it's hard to figure. And I think the only thing I can say on this, off the top of my head, is liquidity and money is not tight. It's not tight. That's one reason why the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, should not have dropped interest rates, by that uber 50 basis point cut. It was really unnecessary, adding liquidity to markets that already have lots of liquidity. So there you have it. That's the best I can come up with.
What else would you like to tell you? We got 15 days, and you're going to have a 3-hour show tomorrow from 10 to 1. It's Economic Saturday. You're Larry Kudlow from 10 to 1, and then Steve Moore from 1 to 3.
Yeah, well, we've got, on the economics front, we've got John Carney of Breitbart, and we've got Scott Bessent, who was an advisor, a brilliant hedge fund manager, worldwide hedge fund manager, and a close advisor to Donald Trump. Scott went with Trump to the Wall Street Journal editorial board meeting yesterday before the Al Smith dinner. So that's going to be great fun. And then we'll be looking at some of the politics, and we'll be looking at the stock market as we always do, and try to figure out what the future holds. Anyway, if it's a Trump market, it's going to keep going up. It may not be. I don't know. I report, you decide. All I'm saying is Trump has the momentum right now. I believe it's his to win or lose.
And if
right
he's not
now.
nasty to anybody, he could take 49 states. Larry Kudlow, I'll be listening to you tomorrow.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it very
Thank
much.
you. And Rita, you have any other additional hot news?
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
There is a lot of news, John. Well, here are some of the big Goya headlines. The road to the White House runs through the swing state of Michigan today. Vice President Harris and former President Trump are each holding events in the Wolverine state with just 18 days to go now. I can't believe it, until Election Day. Harris will speak at an evening rally. Meanwhile, Trump will take part in a community roundtable this evening before holding a rally in Detroit. Also, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country will press on with the wars in Gaza and Lebanon. President Biden says now is a good time for a Gaza ceasefire following the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar on Wednesday. Netanyahu says that Sinwar's killing was a milestone, but vowed to continue the war in Gaza. And also, South Korea's spy agency says North Korea has sent troops to Russia to help fight in the war in Ukraine. In a statement, South Korea's National Intelligence Service says North Korea sent 1,500 special force troops to Russia for training. And this comes after Ukrainian President Zelensky accused North Korea of preparing to send about 10,000 troops to Ukraine to fight alongside Russian forces. The Biden administration says it is looking into Ukraine's claims. And those are the other big headlines of the day. And a lot more coming up on Katz and Cosby. General Blaine Holt and also Rich Lowry talking about Kamala and border.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
Well, as we were saying at the top of Katz and Cosby, Elon Musk even saying that now these Venezuelan migrant gangs, Tren de Aragua, is taking over apartment buildings now in San Antonio, Texas. We heard about it in Aurora, Colorado. It's a huge issue. It's number 1 or 2 in all the polls, immigration and the economy. And joining us now is the great editor of the National Review, my longtime friend, Rich Lowry. Rich, you wrote a great column saying Harris has no credibility on immigration. Tell us why. I agree.
Yeah, well, if you wanted to be honest about this, what you would have to say is, look, we deliberately blew up the border. It's been a debacle. I regret it. I now realize we should do a much better job and actually enforce the laws of the United States. That might not be a sincere answer, but that would be a truthful answer. And she's not going to say that because that confession would just be too damning. So instead, she dances around. She said in the interview with Bret Baier, I think she said in this in 60 Minutes too, from day one, we offered a solution. And what she's talking about is an amnesty bill they offered on day one that had nothing to do with border enforcement. And there wasn't a border crisis on day one because they hadn't successfully blown it up yet. So everything she says on this is so ridiculous.
John Katzimatidis, question. When you intentionally bring in murderers and rapists and drug dealers, can you call that treason?
Yeah, I think they have a sort of a misbegotten worldview that borders are kind of retrograde. They're too exclusionary. They're enforcing them is kind of inherently racist. So it's the right thing to do to let in all these so-called asylum seekers. Now, some of them are legitimate asylum seekers. They've been persecuted wherever they are, and under the laws they can come. But that's a small minority. Everyone else is gaming the system, and they're letting them game it. That's a disgrace of it.
Rich, it's Richard Weinberg. My problem is that you have a system in place, day one, that Trump established, a lawful process where people can come in and be processed. They had to remain in Mexico. It was an orderly system, and it worked. There's a constitutional obligation, a statutory obligation to protect and defend this country and to enforce the immigration laws. From day one, when they started rescinding Trump's executive orders, they violated those obligations. How does she get around that?
Yeah, there's no way to get around it. It's black and white in the law that legal immigrants need to be detained either until they're removed or they have some sort of asylum process that reaches a conclusion, and they're either removed or they get asylum. That's not what they're doing. They're engaged in a deliberate end run around the law. They had the CPB1 app that J.D. Vance was trying to talk about, and that vice presidential debate before he got his mic cut off. That is it's based on admitting inadmissible aliens, right? They show up at ports of entry, and what you're supposed to do at ports of entry, exclude the people who are inadmissible. Instead, they're letting them in. So it's just a shame and a disgrace.
Flying them in to airports in the middle of the night when nobody knew about it.
Yeah, that too.
You know, what did you make? Did you see, Rich, the comments from Mark Cuban? We were at the top of the show. This is amazing. Of course, the, Shark Tank and basketball billionaire comes out and says he's supporting Kamala Harris. And he said the border crisis just got away from the Biden-Harris administration, because he was asked about it on CNN. How do you explain this? How do you explain all these people coming in? And he said, their hearts were just too big. They didn't really realize that they were suddenly allowing. It's like saying, I really wanted to have a nice party, and suddenly, 10 to 20 million came. Give me a break.
Yeah, so it's not something that happened to them. It's something they did. They did it deliberately, beginning on day one with executive orders and running through the first several months there and on. And they were warned. People told them this will be a debacle. You'll have a crisis. And it happened, right? And it was only until like 3.5 years later, when they realized it might be a political problem, that they at least tried to find some way, a facade to appear to be tougher about it. But this is one of the foremost crises that, and I can remember that just deliberately created by an administration. Most crises, they're things that happen to you. Jimmy Carter, it wasn't his fault that Iran took the hostages, right? But this is something Biden went out and did.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, did you also see these comments? Speaker Johnson, it's all over. He told the New York Post, that he had a conversation with Joe Biden and said, why didn't you just, reinstate remain in Mexico? Why don't you just keep it? Remember, they lifted it, the executive order. It was day one. And Biden actually said to him, Mexico doesn't want to do that. We're not going to do it. Isn't he the American president, not the Mexican president?
Yeah, exactly. And this is Trump. It was a diplomatic genius that Trump got Mexico to agree to that, and the Central American countries to agree to so-called safe third country agreements. Another important part of that. But how did he do it? He threatened them. He said, I'm going to tariff you or cut off your foreign aid. And then they said, okay, we'll do it, right? And does anyone around the world respect Joe Biden like that or fear him? No, of course not.
Right, and he lifted it. I mean, that's the irony of it all. It was in place. Had he just kept it in place, think about how many fewer people would have crossed the border because, but no, he comes and he lifts it. And then he's like, Mexico won't allow me. I mean, this is supposed to be the leader of the free world. I mean, that's an embarrassment, Rich.
The other thing they'll say is that it was inhumane because it was unfair to asylum seekers to stay in Mexico for a couple of weeks or months. But now they're all staying in Mexico to wait to apply for the CPB1 app. So they're waiting in Mexico one way or the other. It's just by one process we're excluding them, and by the other process we're letting them in. And it's the latter process they want, and they've created and they're defending.
Exactly. It is incredible. Everybody, we're talking to the editor of the National Review, Rich Lowry. Governor Patterson.
Rich, it seems to me that even though Mark Cuban said they had these big hearts, in a way they kind of did, in the sense that they're so idealistic and think that they are outthinking the other side, when in fact they're really opening the door. And I think that's really what the problem was. It may sound strange to believe, but I think Biden actually believed this stuff when he said it, when everybody else was trying to tell him it wasn't going to work.
Do you think he even remembers what he believes? I mean, come on.
I think it does go to the what I was saying, or the point I was making earlier. They kind of think the border is immoral. And two, that they just thought everything that Trump did was wrong and immoral. Pete Buttigieg was asked about this a month or two ago on some TV show. They said all we did was repeal child separations. Child separations happened for about a period of 10 days, and then the Trump administration was not going to work. We can't do this, and it was reversed. And all the stuff that worked was totally humane and reasonable and lawful, and that's the stuff they repealed.
Amazing. Ed Cox.
Rich, last December, the huge caravans coming up, records, the number of illegals crossing the border, and President Biden realized he had a political problem going into election year. He started changing his policies, didn't he?
Because he saw the polls.
So he got the Mexicans to do some more, which is which is good, but we shouldn't have to rely on a foreign country for our defense at the border. And then two, they engage in this process of legalizing illegal entries. So again, the CPB-1 app, various forms of parole and temporary protected status that gave people who are really illegal aliens a way into the country and when they don't belong here. But the end result's the same. They're getting in. It's just now they're technically legal, so you can get them off the books as illegal aliens. So that a lot of it is just laundering them a different way and an accounting trick.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty good at that. Thank you very much. Unbelievable. Rich Lowry, really great to have you, and great column there in the National Review, my friend.
Great
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. Well, we were also talking about Israel and also Biden thumping his chest today saying, isn't it great Sinwar's dead? Look how great we are. Well, joining us now to talk about all of this is retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, also former C-17 combat commander, and also former U.S. Deputy Military Representative to NATO, General Blaine Holt. General Holt, what do you make of Biden and also Lloyd Austin, the Defense Secretary, making it sound like, boy, aren't we great getting Sinwar?
Happy Friday to everybody. Yeah, it's Fantasy Island on this side of the pond because the Biden administration has done nothing but protect Yahya Sinwar from their policies of admonishing Israel to stay out of Rafah, not to get to a ceasefire much faster. The suggestion that Yahya Sinwar had live hostages around him at all times. Israel finally just threw up their arms and said, look, you're not even telling the truth about us getting aid to the Palestinian people. We're going to do what we need to do. But the bottom line is there's no elegant intelligence here. What we have is the golden BB being fired by a 19-year-old out of a tank in a tube, and then a verification that the terrorists the 19-year-old saw got tagged. A drone went and zeroed in on this one terrorist that they couldn't make out who it was, but the terrorist started to throw a stick at the drone, and then a sniper's bullet ended that terrorist's life. That terrorist ended up being identified the next day as Yahya Sinwar.
And the reality is, and we were just talking about this earlier, Judge Weinberg, has had the Israelis, had Netanyahu been listening to Biden and Harris, I mean, you see all their comments over and over again today where they're like, don't go into southern Gaza, don't go into Rafah. He'd be alive, as will a lot of the others.
And General, it's good to talk to you again. And how about the advice they're telling them, don't go after the nuclear sites in Iran. Don't go after the oil facilities. That's more great legal advice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean what can you imagine?
It's not military advice.
No. Can you imagine we're in an era where a U.S. president has said, do not take out weapons of mass destruction development from one of America's adversaries, that has now occurred? The thing is, from a military perspective, if you were a contrarian and you wanted to develop a really great military strategy, all you'd have to do is the opposite of every single thing this administration, the academics Sullivan and Blinken, have advised, and you'd be on a winning run, and that's exactly what Netanyahu has done. And it all goes back to Vice President Harris turning off that microphone after she admonished him in front of a global audience. They knew that day that we've got to take care of this on our own, and they're not going to stop until they get to a place we never talk about on this side of the pond, and that's a place called victory.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% right. I'm telling you, it is so crazy. Well,
by the way, General, I just got I won't use last names, a text from Mindy, and everybody knows which Mindy it is, and it says that the Israeli guy they captured, he had a lot of personal identifications on him. And hold on. What's a UN? Hold on. What is a UN?
UN Relief Agency?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
He had UN IDs on him.
Passport on him.
Yes.
When they could you explain that, please, General?
Yeah, that Sinwar had UN documents on him for UN IDs and passports on him. He had multiple foreign identities on him. He had a lot of cash.
By the way, and Blaine, you know what? He actually had a senior person, too. It was a senior person. Yeah. It was a senior person,
Let him finish.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So whether you're looking at Hezbollah and weapons dumps right next to UNIFIL, UN mission outposts, or you're looking at the UN links to Hamas, what I would do is take you right to the website of the UN UNRWA position or their website. They put a black stripe on their logo on their website when they found out Sinwar was killed. You don't need to know any more than that. That they were the UNRWA is mourning the loss of Sinwar. So any idea that the UN is this multinational bastion where peace and rainbows grow is ridiculous, and all of that is just gone. And the Israelis live with this reality every single day, and they have told UNIFIL up in Hezbollah in Lebanon, you need to get out of there because we're coming on. And there's the dishonesty of it. It's right there in front of everybody, but nobody in this administration will call it out.
So, General, that stripe is still there?
It is still, well, I don't know. I checked it 6 hours ago, and it was very much there. But the Israelis noted it immediately. I track with them every single morning.
General, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for everything you've done for our country, and continue to speak out for our country.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Blaine.
Let's take a break, and we're going to have some more interesting conversations coming right back.
Yep, afterwards. We've got Greg Jarrett coming up.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. Everybody talking about this big release by the D.C. judge tied to Jack Smith, the special counsel. How is this not election interference? It's all about January 6th, things that are supposedly damning but one-sided against President Trump. Are you kidding me? It's 2 weeks away. This is crazy. Joining us now is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, your take on this. This is stunning.
Well, it's a deliberate attempt by the judge, Tanya Chutkan, to sway an election. It's election interference. What's remarkable is that, when you read, I think it's like 5 pages, the order, she doesn't really deny what she's doing. She writes, well, this information is incidental. It is not. And then she says, and I'm quoting here, that's not the same thing as a court's intentional interference. So she's unwittingly admitting that which she claims is false. And even dumber is her comment that withholding information is election interference. No, it's not. That's absurd. The good news, I think, for Donald Trump is that voters well know what's going on. This case brought by Jack Smith is legally weak. It's factually and evidentiary bereft. It's more of the same lawfare that Democrats launched the moment Trump announced he's running for president. People see it, I think, Rita, for what it is. It's an illegitimate attempt to smear and sully the Republican candidate to gain votes, literally, while votes are being cast in some states. And, of course, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is all in on this. He should have ordered Smith delay any court filings until after the election. That's the written rule at the DOJ. But instead, Garland and Smith went out of order bringing this anti-Trump campaign advertisement, because that's what it really is. And the judge let him get away with it. She cheered him on. So it's pretty shameful conduct by Judge Tanya Chutkan.
Greg Jarrett, Judge Weinberg has a question.
Greg, that's exactly right. There was absolutely no procedural or legal reason why they should have been dealing with this issue until after the election. She controls her own calendar like any trial judge. She could have said no, or she could have taken the filing and put it under seal and release it after the election.
Yeah, the lawyers have it. It should have been under seal. There's no reason to release it to the public. There's no purpose in doing that except for the obvious, to damage Trump and help Kamala Harris get elected. And, even CNN's legal analyst, I'll give him some credit here. He said, look, I was a federal prosecutor. Prosecutors don't bring this motion. The defense gets to bring the motion first. But he went out of order because he wanted to release it to the public, and the judge let him do it. And when Trump's lawyers protested and said, keep it under seal, with no discussion, she said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm releasing it to the public. And now she's done it again because the first time she issued a release It didn't gain any traction. And this is not going to gain traction either. Nobody cares about Jack Smith and his silly case.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed Cox, your thoughts? It's really interesting, the timing.
That's absolutely true. I mean, the first release was a complete flop, and a lot of this is grand jury evidence, is it not? That is just completely blanked out because you can't release that.
It is, Ed, you're absolutely right, and that only underscores how crooked this is by the judge and by Jack Smith. You know, if Trump is elected, this case will get dismissed as it should have been immediately. And, you know, he's already got a malicious prosecution case against Jack Smith in the Florida matter, which was dismissed by the judge because Smith had no constitutional jurisdiction. And so, in the end, justice tends to grind rather slowly, the wheels of it. But in the end, I think Donald Trump's going to get the last laugh and maybe a bucket load of money as well.
Wow. Well, Greg Jarrett, thank you very much. It's really great to have you on.
Oh, my pleasure as always. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And joining us now, we have Doug Schoen, the great political pollster and political consultant. Doug, great to have you here. Your take, by the way, on the latest poll numbers, they seem to be going towards Trump, especially after that Fox News interview with Kamala and our friend Bret Baier.
You know, everything, Rita, reflects that. Every poll I'm seeing has showed movement to Trump. I think he's up in 5 or 6 of the 7 swing states, but there is no poll anywhere that I am aware of that shows movement to Kamala Harris. The Democrats, from those I talk to, are panicking. They're scared. And the Republicans and Trump have momentum and energy, and Trump is running a very energetic schedule in the swing states, as he's done twice previously.
And do you attribute that to the interview? Do you attribute it to, like, the more we see of her, the more people are going, we want a little more meat on the bone, a little more substance, or any substance? What do you attribute it to?
Well, Rita, I certainly can say the interview didn't help her. And the way her people wrapped it up didn't help her either. But I think what you said thereafter is probably the real reason. I think the more people see of Kamala, the less they like her. I think this campaign's gone on a little too long for her, and there's too little substance. So the absence of substance and the absence of any really likable persona in her, particularly with swing voters or persuadables, makes the difference.
You know, it's interesting. You say that. Go ahead, Gov Patterson.
Doug, I was just going to say that every time Harris got some momentum, it's followed by silence, which is like the opposite of what people do when they're actually doing well. In other words, if you do something well, you should get out there and do it over and over and over again. But it's almost as if she runs out of gas at a certain point, and then there's 2 weeks and you haven't heard from her.
Yeah, and Governor, what you're saying is basically she's a talking point candidate. She's not speaking from the heart. She is speaking from the teleprompter, and she does what she's told when she's told, and there's no emotion, enthusiasm, much less a program or a record.
That's why her lack of appearance at the Alfred E. Smith dinner hurt double, because at least when you meet somebody in person, even if you perceivably didn't like them before, there's always a way that people that's actually why they had that dinner and why they would like both candidates to be there.
Yeah, and I think it was a bad move for one other reason, Governor, which is that dinner reaches working class Catholics, more upscale Catholics, basically the kind of people who have doubts about her, and by her not showing up, it underscored the nature of her appeal, which is what we used to call a top-down appeal without any appeal to those in the middle.
Agreed.
You know what's interesting, Doug? Our jaws kind of dropped, at least mine did, when you said the campaign's lasted too long. She's only been in the race. What is it, a few
3
months? Right. I mean, what, she needed 3 days? I mean, that's incredible.
Well, let's just say she'd do better with a 3-day campaign than a 3-month campaign.
Or she'd work out of the bullpen.
Well, let's put it this way. She's not a closer.
Right. For sure. Good job, Doug.
Yeah,
wow.
That was great. Actually, that was really good. Doug, thank you so much. We love having you on, and
Thank
keep
you
us
for having
posted.
me.
We always love having you,
I will
Doug.
do that. Sir.
Thank you very much. Wow. And guys, what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way. God bless America.